Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Grace Hatfield from EHS Daily Advisor, and thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Faces of EHS. This is a segment where we feature environmental health and safety professionals and highlight their journeys and hear their thoughts about EHS trends and issues. Today, we are joined by Luke Jacobs, who is the CEO and co founder of Encamp. So, hi, Luke, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Grace. How are you?
Good, I'm doing well. So let's get right into it. Can
Mhm.
you tell me a little bit about your position at Encamp and what you guys do as a company?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start actually with Encamp, a little bit about the company. So, we're an environmental technology platform
Hmm.
that works with really large enterprises to essentially organize their data at a facility level, create data pipelines to collect the right information kind of in predictable cadences, and then ultimately we automate compliance reporting for a couple different environmental regulations and program areas, specifically EPCRA and RCRA in the United States, and then plans to expand, significantly further than that into Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act. Kind of go down the kind of usual suspects of environmental compliance reports. My role at the company, I am, as you said, the CEO and one of the co-founders.
Hmm.
This really means that I've done most jobs at the company, at least in some small capacity over time. When we started, it was really just me and my two other partners.
Hmm.
And really, from kind of building out the initial website and, kind of like writing marketing copy, doing sales, doing regulatory compliance mapping, the whole thing, up until this point now, where really, as the CEO, primarily I work with the other leaders around the company to align product engineering. We have a compliance and customer success team, which is staffed essentially by a bunch of environmental consultants who have a lot of deep knowledge in the space, as well as then our sales and marketing efforts. And I work with a lot of our larger customers, especially as we work on kind of extending our capabilities and always working to kind of drive those results forward for our customers. So really no 2 days are exactly the same as a CEO,
Hmm.
but it's always interesting and get to work with a lot of really smart people in the space working and make environmental compliance, roughly just fast, simple, and accurate for companies. And that's really what we aim to do every day when we get to work.
Well, that sounds awesome. So, how did you get your start in EHS?
Yeah, great question. A little bit circuitous, although in kind of hindsight, it makes a lot of sense. So I actually started out really in purely the environmental research space. In undergrad, I did environmental science and worked in a biogeochemistry research lab. Did that from actually the summer before my freshman year. I was in a competitive research fellowship, got placed with a lab. It's actually where I met one of my co-founders, Dan. He was another research fellow. Uh, and working through that, ended up really kind of getting caught with the research bug. Led my own project. Ended up first authoring a paper in Journal of Ecology, and was really planning on doing a doctorate. Actually, just doing a PhD in ecology. Um,
Hmm.
and I reached a moment where I actually was thinking about in publishing a paper, I saw that there's so much knowledge in the environmental space, in particular, that is there and that people have figured out. And I really was struck by the gap of how do we implement these. Pieces of knowledge that we have to
Hmm.
actually move, industry forward, agriculture forward, like kind of pick anything. There's lots of research, but I was really interested in how you kind of integrate that into, really the boots on the ground reality of these companies, and was quite inspired by entrepreneurs like Elon Musk, who had really thought about taking something theoretical like solar battery generation, solar power
Hmm.
batteries, thinking about making this actually not just something that you would kind of have a paper about how you could maybe make this more efficient or how you could build photovoltaics to do what have you, but really was thinking like how do you actually do that. And I thought that was quite compelling, so I ended up joining a consulting firm
Hmm.
out of school, where I was an environmental consultant, really working with these big energy companies, primarily getting started some manufacturing and automotive as well. Uh, to really see, I think, like how the sausage was made, like how do these companies actually operate, and what are their realities that they have to deal with, their constraints, with an overall motivation, kind of coming from it of thinking if I can help even in a small way make a really large company, a major oil company, 1% more efficient, the impact that would actually have on sustainability, on the environment, on protecting, human health and environmental health was really quite large, I thought, just because the scale of those organizations are already so massive. So that's kind of how I came into the space. And then I think pretty quickly one of the things I was quite struck by was thinking about the reality of with consulting firms, a lot of the actual business model is based upon the billable hour. It's predicated
Mhm.
on a service provider being able to sell their time. And one of the things that I had kind of really developed intellectually coming from academia was this thought process of, really just how do we solve the problem, so to speak. Like, what is
Mhm.
the first principles based approach that just gets us to the answer we actually want, and how do you do it kind of as efficiently as possible, and really seeing that there was going to be some challenges, at least at kind of an entry level employee at a consulting firm, to you know spend time on, say, like R&D. Like, I was very interested in how do we automate manual form filling. I was like, can we
Mhm.
eliminate copy pasting? A lot of my job I found was copy pasting information. I was thinking that's something which a computer is very good at doing this, and I've got my data already in a matrix, and I should be able to write a script to be able to move this from my Excel file into a PDF or what have you. Uh, and I was quite captured by this thought of, if we can align really the incentives between the regulated companies, the regulators themselves, and then the service providers, you can actually have the opportunity to really drive efficiencies across the board. Where, if you're a regulated company, what you really want to do is be able to be in compliance. You want to have confidence that you are actually doing the right things. There's a lot of
Mhm.
moving parts, so it's just hard to know if you're doing it correctly. And you need the visibility. You want to know if you're doing it right, and you don't really care how fast or slow it was done. This kind of like model of me billing by the hour seemed like I wasn't able to really make them more efficient, because it would
Mhm.
actually cut down on my ability to bill. So my bosses were like, that's not a great idea for your own career. From the regulators perspective, I think regulators deal with getting data in all sorts of different formats, and really seeing that there wasn't kind of a unified data format for this information that was parsable by all different agencies, and just kind of trying to get them clean data was something that was also a real motivation. And then,
Mhm.
ultimately, I think, as the service provider, really what we've been trying to do with Encamp is to make fundamental to our business model that we want to drive efficiencies with technology, because that actually, those efficiencies get passed on to our customers as cost savings and the ability to do more quicker, rather than you know kind of traditionally a consulting firm's model, especially on some of the back office stuff, because consulting firms do all
Mhm.
sorts of stuff. But really the compliance reporting, I think the status quo makes it very hard for those service providers to have an incentive to make things work, you know, 10 times better than they work. Maybe you make it a little bit better, but you really
Mhm.
would have trouble, staying in business without changing away from being kind of this hourly model. So kind of circuitous, but that's really like the long story of kind of how I came to get to the position that I'm in now.
Awesome. So what is your best mistake and what did you learn from it?
Oh man, that's a great question. I would say one of the things that I have learned that was, I think, even more than maybe a mistake, it was a miscalibration. I
Mhm.
have I have learned quite a lot. There's a saying, actually, I was shared this by a mentor of mine, which is, you will almost always overestimate what you can accomplish in a year, and you'll
Mhm.
underestimate what you can accomplish in 5 years. And I would say one of the best mistakes that I made was actually not believing that, and thinking when I was starting in camp that I was going to get so much done in the first year, and I was very motivated, and just actually seeing how incorrect I was on that. And I mean, at the end of the year, I was like, man, this is really hard. I need to do so much more. We had only gotten a little bit of what we had actually envisioned, uh, but actually having leapt. Was so critical. Like, once you get the momentum going, at this point, fast forward, we're now, in our fifth year, and really, we've come, frankly, much further than I predicted at the beginning. So I would say it's almost like in some ways a mistake to start a company if you think it will be something that succeeds very quickly and that is not
Yeah.
really challenging. But I think it was something that I don't regret at all. But it has been, I would say, striking how much I how much I found that to be true. Where my predictions were kind of off from the initial jumping in
Mhm.
to where we are now. So I don't
Absolutely,
know.
and, things that are worth it take a lot of time, so absolutely,
Yeah,
I agree.
totally.
So what is your favorite and least favorite part about working in environmental health and safety?
Yeah, so I would say probably the best part is the people. I think it's really great to work in an industry where almost everyone who is in this space is at some level bought into the mission.
Mhm,
It is not a space where you're coming in if you just want to make as much money as possible. It's not like pure business. It's not quite as I'd say almost like mercenary as some other industries where it really is just like
mhm,
who's got the best jobs moving around. I really think the people, I get to work with, chemists and people with, safety backgrounds, people with environmental backgrounds, people who are really trying hard to, improve their processes, make sure people are safe, make sure that the environment is safe, make sure their companies are more efficient, more sustainable. So I really love that. And, I think the Encampers are also awesome. We get to work with a really great team, and I think we're fortunate as a technology company to walk the line where we get to both really play in the technology startup space. We employ a ton of engineers, really brilliant kind of people straight out of Silicon Valley. And then
mhm,
we also employ a ton of environmental scientists, compliance specialists, people who are have been working in the space for a decade, 2 decades, really, really committed to it. Um, Probably my least favorite part of the space, truly, is that the technological adoption curve is pretty low.
mhm,
So just we're dealing with. It's also kind of the opportunity because we really are often one of the first kind of digital transformation solutions that our companies are engaging with. Not across the board, but like there's a lot of kind of greenfield space to help find improvements. But the challenge of that is that uh, we go through a lot of kind of brick walls, so to speak. Like we're building a lot of that kind of ground level infrastructure, data models. Like how do you
mhm,
actually map what requirements exist across the entire data scheme for an EPCR report in all states with all counties taken into account. It's a very combinatorial and complex space due to sort
mhm,
of all the different like intersections of a facility in a state, in a county with different operations, has different regulations that apply to it. It gets very complicated, and frankly the data is often uh I'd say, to put it generously, it's kind of like disparate. It's in
mm,
different
mhm,
places in different levels of quality, a lot of spreadsheets. So that's something where it's what we're actually working towards. We're trying to build kind of a more systematic and holistic view of how this data should be kind of understood and managed, tracked, reported on. And that's something, especially coming from kind of both this technology and environmental perspective. It's something where, for instance, there are not a lot of well supported like APIs in this space. That
mhm,
there's not a tech ecosystem where we can tap into other people's data models and pull information. So that does make it fundamentally fairly challenging, but also not to make it all positive, but it's like in that challenge is actually probably like the most exciting part of the opportunity, which is that we're really on that ground floor. I just truly believe building value every day that we're, digging deeper into the space. So my complaints are, if I really didn't like it, it would be much harder to do this, right?
yeah,
My
absolutely,
complaints
yeah,
are minor, truly, but I would say, yeah, technology adoption is something that I look forward to seeing this accelerate and doing my small part to help that acceleration and help companies not only understand what technology can do for them, but then I think really like leverage it and make sure that it actually happens.
mhm,
Ideas are cheap, execution is very, very complicated. So saying
mhm.
like wouldn't it be great if we digitized everything is that's pretty easy.
Easier
uh,
said than
do,
done, right?
Doing that is then where the
Yeah.
value really comes in. Yeah, for sure, for
For
sure.
sure. So, you talked about value. How can company leaders really make safety a core value, whether it be with safety culture, or how do you promote that as the top priority?
Yeah, it's a challenging question, but I think it really does begin. It maybe not even begin, but it is a must, an imperative almost, I guess, to have really a top down initiative, but then
Mhm.
also the bottoms up initiative. It's really not something that you can just do from a leadership perspective. And at the same time, you can't just expect your employee base to be able to do all of this themselves. So I'd really say being able to create kind of feedback loops that provide visibility and buy-in from all parties. I think this is actually it's not exactly safety, but I think this is also similar with just rolling out any sort of initiative and making sure that you have buy-in. It's really helpful to get the multiple levels of like, why are we doing this in the
Mhm.
minds of each of your stakeholders so that they're not just being told, hey, you got to do lockout, tag out. It's important. It's really helping them understand, why and
Mhm.
exploring near misses and being able to kind of reverse engineer like this is what has led us to why we are here now and why these practices are so important and getting in that buy-in really from a groundswell, as well as then I just think leaders have to be extremely vocal. Frankly, I think if leadership does not make it a top priority and kind of live that value out, it will be very hard for for it to kind of like percolate down into the employee base as well. But it is tricky. I mean, I
Mhm.
think it's a challenging thing. If I had the complete answer, I'd be telling people about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, I know you mentioned AI and trying to get,
Mhm.
more standardization across the board in terms of data. So, where do you see the industry heading, say in like 5 years? Are you seeing any current trends now?
Yeah, yeah,
What's your insight
totally.
there?
Yeah, so I think there's definitely a lot of progress being made. I think in terms of a couple different vectors. I would say generally standardizing these data sets, and even there are some companies I know that are working on making even regulations more machine readable. So like, how do you make a more like an
Mm,
XML format for an actual regulation so that it's not just words. Like I think something very challenging in this space frankly is that regulations are written in like English or what have you, whatever language, but then they're actually dealing with concepts that are often like math or
mhm,
physics. Like what is the like it's physical constraints of like objects that you have and like materials that you have that have reactivity and all sorts of kind of these complexities that it's pretty easy to write a paragraph about like you need to make sure these things happen, but then the devil's going to be in the details.
mhm,
So I think that really like that trend of kind of translating regulations into more machine readable formats is definitely already happening, going to pick up steam. I also think just broadly applying machine vision and AI to digitizing and extracting document information
mhm,
and turning that into basically like putting it inside an actual relational database, kind of turning it into software, so to speak, is accelerating. It's something we do at Encamp a lot. We actually for instance, safety data sheets. We're working on some machine learning, machine vision that allows us to extract hazard classes and GHS codes and what have you, from that, because really there's such a mountain of data that exists in
mhm,
PDFs, manifests, all sorts of stuff that really is challenging to kind of make heads or tail of if it's all just like you're opening up million PDF files. So
mhm,
I think that trend is going to really continue. I also then think just automation is very much accelerating, both in terms of data collection. So most compliance reporting, it involves some amount of upfront data collection, and this has traditionally been very manual. But I think there's a lot of technological efforts being put towards from the environmental side, kind of these more
mhm,
automated data collection mechanisms, as well as from the safety side there's wearable technology, kind of more like industry 4.0, these kind of connected sensor networks, which I think are really interesting to get the data in. Then something that we're really kind of on the forefront of so far is really pushing that data to the regulators as well to make the compliance pipelines more automated, also, so that you
mhm,
actually as a regulator can be receiving the right data at the right time in the right format, and really cutting down on kind of data quality issues. I think that that's going to be, I think, a accelerating trend as well, particularly just as software and especially kind of cloud computing capabilities are just accelerating. They're getting cheaper to be able to run like heavy compute.
Mhm.
So I think that's going to be something that only accelerates. So yeah, I mean there are a lot of trends, but I would say like broadly, the way I kind of think about it on some levels is that there are things that humans are really uniquely good at doing. So
Mhm.
something kind of at Encamp, we're like, hey, we'll never be like a professional engineer. We're never going to sign off on a bridge, design. There's all sorts of stuff that like people are so smart and know how to do, all sorts of
Mhm.
stuff that would be very hard to turn into technology. Then there are the things that really I'm like, computers are great at moving like a ton of data from like point A to point B with maybe a
Mhm.
transformation step. Right now, that's something where like so much of this is done by hand. And I think that is going to be, 20 years from now, I think that copy pasting is not going to be a way that really anyone does compliance reporting. I think this will be, you
Mhm.
know, uh, I'd say a good analog space is kind of like where financial services have kind of gone over the last 20 years. I think environmental compliance is going to move that direction, safety compliance over the next 10 to 20 years as well, where,
Mhm.
like e-filing your taxes didn't used to be a thing. Now it's kind of like impossible to imagine not having, digital,
Yeah,
connectivity. You're like,
for
I would
sure.
mail that away. Like, why would I do that? That's the kind of, that seems so archaic, but in
Mhm.
environmental compliance, like literally, like we mail stuff all the time at Encamp. We do it with an API where we'll send it, via a computer call, and we use a
Mhm.
service that then like makes that a piece of certified mail that physically gets printed and mailed and delivered. Um, and that's something where I think it's like that's a half measure. The longer term measure is just having these kind of connected systems that talk to each other in real time and just actually kind of operate on a
Mhm.
purely digitized level. I don't think
Yeah.
it'll happen overnight. It's
Yeah.
very very
Yeah.
complicated, but I think the trend's definitely moving that direction. There's an appetite for it.
Yeah, so do you have a favorite or something that you're the most excited about in terms of AI and the impact it'll have on the environment?
Oh, that's a big one. So I mean, impact on the environment, I would say that like there are numerous things that are very interesting about sort of like smart grids and being like, and way outside the purview of even Encamp, but just being able to
Mhm.
be hyper responsive to, changing variables where if you've got, arrays of sensor data coming in, and then you also have AI that knows how to interpret this very quickly and then take different actions. There are really a lot of, I think, just like efficiencies that can be unlocked with how society functions.
Mhm.
um that's like super broad because I mean honestly there's so many different like I'm not sure I even have one. I'd say like just an interesting example is something of like self-driving technology has the
Mhm.
possibility, it's not like it would change everything with the environment, but just like so much of traffic science is like it's the daisy chaining of like first car moves and then takes a second, then the second car starts moving and then the driver takes a second, just all of that actually makes things like move slower, you burn more fuel, all these things. And
Mhm.
I think just as we move into a world where we have more machine vision that's kind of deployed and really tested and gets better and better, uh, that's just one small example, but I mean it's kind of the possibility of like all the cars start moving as soon as the light turns green kind of efficiency
Mhm.
seems really interesting. Frankly, I don't know, there are a lot of things.
Yeah.
Carbon accounting is very interesting. I think
Mhm.
ESG is something where there's a lot of data inputs, and I think getting feeding those models more and more information to start unlocking places where there could be even further kind of environmental value mined out and sustainability kind of efficiency increases mined out could be really interesting.
Mhm.
I'll be honest, like I'm so pragmatically deep on like mostly what I'm thinking about for AI at least day to day is like how do I take how do we take lots of information that is on PDFs and get it
Mhm.
into a machine readable format so that if
Yeah.
you're a facility worker and you need to access a safety data sheet, that's not in a binder that you need to go find somewhere and tab through all this stuff. That's something where you should be able to, pull it up on a tablet that's embedded on the wall or something, have like immediate access to it. Um, this is actually a complete aside, but just kind of an interesting piece of technology. I think that voice activated like technology kind of calls could be very interesting, building different kind of voice
Mhm.
commands to have kind of immediate access to information. What should I do if this occurs? Being able to make that more kind of natural for a human to just say like, this has happened, what should I do? And it's like, you should do this.
Mhm.
Could be really interesting, just making it easier for people to access the right information at the right time. There's all kinds of stuff.
Gotcha.
Really, I think it's hard to pick one.
Yeah,
I'll
that's
be
why I
real.
wanted to pick your brain about it for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
So I have one last question for you. It's a two-parter.
Mm.
So, what are you most proud of, and do you have any advice for people entering the field of EHS?
Yeah, yeah. That's a great question. I would probably say the thing that I am actually most proud of is the team that we have put together at
Mhm.
Encamp. I think is such a unique mix of different perspectives and backgrounds, just to all kind of attacking this shared mission and problem that we're trying to solve. Really does get me excited, especially seeing this come from, I started the company with $12,000 with two other people, and at this point, we're going to be pushing 70 employees. We'll have more than 100 employees this year. Absolutely, and that makes me really proud. Not even
Yeah.
really for my own accomplishment, but for really the collective output of this group. I think really amazing things have gotten done by this team, and kind of mountains have been moved.
Mhm.
So that's been exciting. I mean, the culmination of, in some ways, it's almost like winning awards or stuff like that is just sort of like it's the window dressing of the work that's already preceded. So
Mhm.
uh, for instance, so like, not like a humble brag, like I got Forbes 30 under 30 this year. That's
Oh,
something
wow,
where honestly, like,
congratulations.
thanks. But I mean, really, I
Yeah.
think it's something where, that is the summation of a lot of work from both myself and then a lot of other people that
Yeah.
so much has gone into it that it's almost like the individual sort of like accolades or an award itself is, it's not the worst, right? Like, I wouldn't
Yeah.
turn it away, but it's something where it's like that's not really like the goal. The goal for us is really, solving the problem and delivering for the customer, which I'm really proud of. And I would really, kind of transition that into truly my advice for people getting into the EHS space is go and try to just drive value. Go and get involved and try to learn as much as you can and just be curious about not only how it's working now,
Mhm.
but how it sort of fundamentally could work. It's something that I really I try to think in first principles, which is really again an Elon Musk thing that I've kind of introduced by following his journey. But it's something where if you're like, we want to build an environmental compliance process to do a thing, instead of thinking about like, okay, let's start with the big version of like, we'll have this whole technology system or whatever. It's like, try to get to the kind of like, what are the basic building blocks? Like, what is compliance? Well, first you
Mhm.
need to understand like what requirements you have. Well, what requirements exist to me, the person? No, it's to a facility. So it's like, okay, so I need to have like a concept of a facility. Like I have a location. That's
Mhm.
like a critical thing. It's something with Encamp we've really thought about that, where it's like our technology is all kind of surrounding a facility data object, and then you append more and more and more information onto that, uh, which I think is something that a lot of people do not actually approach problems, I think, kind of from
Hmm.
that like fundamental level of like like assume that it's just like open field and you're building from scratch. What would it look like if you're just trying to really approach it from sort of the most atomic kind of components that you can?
Mhm.
I would not, not everybody needs to start a company by any means, but I would say like if you are approaching any sort of problem in the EHS space, like it will benefit people in their career to, dive in and really try to just learn and try to break down, what is going on, for themselves. They should be able to understand like, why am I doing what I'm doing? And not just be
Mhm.
like, well, because my boss told me I should do it. It should really be like, well, I'm doing it because like this is critical. And because that's critical, it leads to this, which leads to this, which leads to this, to actually, I think, kind of like really have have a buy-in for yourself, because a lot of it is also for careers. It is a marathon, not a sprint.
Hmm.
So a lot of it is like being able to know your own whys and to stay curious along the journey, because it is all about the journey, not the destination. Arrival is kind of, I think, it's not a real thing in some ways.
Hmm.
As soon as you've arrived somewhere, it's just another place that you have been along your journey, and the journey continues. So I don't know.
Absolutely.
So just, also, like, when you're young, really, like, risks, I would encourage people to take more risks than they think are probably reasonable for them. Of course, like, don't take risks that, like, put yourself in physical harm or anything like that. There
Yeah.
there are risks to avoid, right? But things like, just actually, like, I was thinking about starting a company or not, and thinking, well, worst case scenario, it doesn't work and I am still, just going to get another job and just continue on. I'm, young, beginning
Hmm.
my career. It's not like you have a lot of opportunity costs. And I think that's something where, as you get older, you do actually have more opportunity costs. You're like, well, I have a mortgage now, well, I have kids now, well, I
Yeah,
have a better
exactly.
job. So, like, there's more to lose from that. So in some ways, it's like when you're getting started is the best time possible, I think, to make some bold moves, and kind of dream a little bit bigger, and just remain steadfast in, like, if you can figure out how to deliver value to people, like, everything will kind of work out. Don't
Hmm.
chase fame, chase providing people with amazing value, and kind of, like, I don't know, everything else kind of will, I think, trickle down appropriately. But if you flip it around, I think it's like a very quick path to just be kind of miserable if you're just doing it
Yeah.
for, like, external validation. It's probably not going to long term, like, provide you with what you're really looking for.
Yeah, well, great. Thank you so much for your time. This has been a pleasure, and I'm sure our audience will love to hear all of your insights.
I hope so. It's been a
Yeah.
pleasure to be on, and I appreciate the conversation together.